Pipe leaks can happen anytime, and they can be a real mess. I turned the water off to the house, drained the system, and cut the pipes underneath the bathroom using my auto cut tool, which I really like because it fits in tight spots. I found a spot on the pipe that wasn't corroded yet, then I deburred it with my rigid reamer, which deburrs both the inside and outside of the pipe. I used emery cloth and a nylon grip pad to make the copper shine, and then I also employed ODH2O water-soluble flux on the pipe and this female sweat adapter for pape, which has the same diameter as the copper pipe. I held that in place with my measuring tape and then used OD Safe Flow solder to solder the adapter to the copper pipe. Now for this project, we're going to be using Upener Aquapex. This is PEX A. You use the Pro PEX rings, and you expand the pipe and the ring 5 times with the Milwaukee M12 expansion tool. Push that through your plates or your studs, and what I really like is it's super fast, and the rings continue to collapse onto the fittings over time and become stronger as time passes. And that's great. That's one of the really nice benefits of PEX A. Plus, it's corrosive resistant and it's super fast to install on any of the fittings. So I'm using the M12 expansion tool. It fits in tight spots, and I just replaced all this pipe in a matter of seconds. What I also like about the PEX A is it's very flexible, so it'll fit through all the existing holes in your dimensional lumber. Once I was done with the bathroom, I went below it. I soldered another female adapter on place for my water supply lines, and I simply added a T to connect everything together. The minimum distance between the fittings is 2.5 inches for half-inch piping, so keep that in mind if you're doing a similar repair like this. When you're done with everything, you can use a J-hook to hold the PEX in place, and don't forget your steel plates as well. That's super important. But hopefully these tips help you out with your own copper pipe leak. Tips will help you waterproof between drywall and Curdy board. First, dampen the drywall, then apply thin set over top of the seam. I'm just using a 6-inch joint compound knife, then troweling additional thin set into that using the Curdy trowel and embedding Curdy band into the thin set. That's going to waterproof the seam. The most important thing is to smooth out the Curdy band using your 6-inch joint compound knife and removing any of the excess thin set with a sponge. Toilets are a big nuisance, and in this video we're going to tackle one way to repair them, and that's by replacing the fill valve. So turn the water off at the supply line, flush the toilet, and remove all the water from the tank. Then use a sponge to remove the rest of the water and remove the supply line from the old fill valve and then the nut from the fill valve holding it to the bottom of the tank. Take the old valve out, make sure the rubber gasket's on the new valve, and typically you have to make some adjustments to the height of the new fill valve, so always read the directions on that. Make sure the hose goes onto the little clip that goes on the overflow tube. Make sure that's in place. Add the new nut to the bottom of the new fill valve. Hand tighten that only. Add the supply line and turn on the water at the shutoff valve. Pretty easy, right? It only takes a few minutes. Now this fill valve, you can adjust the height of the water both in the tank and the height of the water in the bowl. So make sure you do that before you move on and go to your next project in your house. But hopefully these tips help you fix a running toilet. Pretty easy to do, and I hope it helps you out. These tips will help you fix a bowed out stud. Remove any of the staples, screws, or nails from it, and then use an electric planer. Set it at 1/32 of an inch. Use a bag, have the dust blow into that bag, and have super sharp blades. If you put a level on your studs, you'll be able to see where they're bowed out, and simply run the planer up a few times until you plane it down to where you need it. But this is a very quick way to fix those bowed out studs, and I hope the tips help you out. This tip will help make your electrical project much safer. This is the Klein digital circuit breaker finder. You plug the transmitter into the live outlet, you go down to the circuit breaker, and you find which one runs back up to the outlet, and you turn that breaker off. You go back, you test it, you make sure there's no electricity running to it, but this will definitely make your project much safer and faster to do. So hopefully this tip helps you out. Shower drain installation is easier with these tips. First, make a square cut on the pipe coming up out of the floor, chamfer that, and then dry fit your shower drain and make sure it's level. From here, I got a measurement from the bonding flange down to the top of the foam insert for my Schluter tray, and I have an adjustable internal pipe cutter. This is awesome. I set it to 6 1/8 of an inch. I cut a square cut. I chamfered that pipe, and that allowed me to dry fit the drain and prep it for solvent welding. Tips will help you wet shim your shower walls using Schluter All Set. I'm mixing up a small batch. I'm just hand mixing it with the margarine trowel in a small bucket, and you want the thin set to barely fall off the margarine trowel. Also, hot tip, make sure your studs are 16 inches on center, and take a 6-foot level and check all the studs to make sure they're plumb. If they're not plumb, that's what this wet shimming is for. And you can just mark the location on the stud where it needs to be wet shimmed. Just do that with a pencil. Then you can take your thin set off your trowel, use your margarine trowel to create a V-notch onto the stud. The V-notch is going to be compressed behind the backer board and make it perfectly plumb when you use a level on it. So as you can see here, we just have that V on it, and that's what you want. You just want that along the section of the stud that needs to be wet shimmed. So just take note of where it needs to be shimmed out. Don't totally depress your screws and washers into the board. Just lightly press the board into the thin set and screw it in place. Then you can check it with a level, and then you'll have perfectly plumb walls the next day. So hopefully these tips help you out. Varnish framing for this project began with the tile work. I wanted the tile to run right across the bottom of the niche, so I dry fitted, marked the locations on the studs, made sure that was level, measured down 1.5 inches for the bottom plate, and up 1.5 inches for the top plate. Those are my cut marks. The first cut I made with a rafter square and a circular saw. Then I used a 6-inch wrecker blade with my reciprocating saw to cut through most of the stud. Then I finished it off with an oscillating multi-tool. The bottom plate went in first. I made sure that was level. Then I screwed it in place, and I did the exact same thing for the top plate. Here's a tip. You want there to be a little bit of wiggle room between your niche and these bottom and top plates, so they don't have to be perfectly positioned. Then I centered the niche on the center of the shower, and that helped me position my cripple studs inside the shower wall, and I made sure that everything was nice and square, as you can see here, and I double checked that the studs wouldn't interfere with my backer board. Hopefully these tips help you frame a shower niche for your bathroom remodel. Copper pipe soldering can always be a little bit tricky, so hopefully these tips help you out. So the first step of vertical pipes is to prep them. I like using 120 grit emery cloth followed by a nylon grip pad. I also like this rigid deburring tool to deburr both the inside and the outside of the copper pipe. It's a great tool because it's got a slim profile and fits inside walls. Then I use OD H2O water soluble flux. I mix that up so the salts are mixed in, and then apply just a very thin layer to the first ½ inch of the pipe and to the inside of the coupling after it's prepped with a wire brush. I push that together and then remove any of the excess flux that's on the pipe and the fitting, and I do the exact same thing for the vertical pipe above this. Then I use a mag torch and reduce the flame and use a flame protector pad. I preheat the first ½ inch of the pipe, then apply heat to the bottom of the coupling until the solder melts. And because heat flows upward, I don't really use a lot of heat for the top portion. I just go ahead and apply the solder until it melts. And I let that sit for a few seconds and wipe off any of the excess flux, and there you go. Hopefully these tips help you out. For pipe repair, it doesn't have to be hard, but the first step is to prep the pipes. So I'm deburring them and using a nylon grip pad to clean the copper. I really like this rigid deburring tool because it's got a slim profile and can fit inside the walls, and the nylon grip pad is nice because it really makes the copper pipe shine. I'm also prepping the inside of the coupling with the wire brush, and then I used OD H2O water-soluble flux. I applied that to both pipes as well as the fitting. And you don't need a ton of the flux. I'm just applying enough to have a thin coating. So I'm putting the coupling onto the copper pipe and then sliding the copper pipes together and making sure that all the excess flux is wiped off of the fitting and the pipes. That's really important. Then I'm going to be using OD Safe Flow solder. I preheat the copper pipe, and then I focus the heat on the center of the fitting and apply the solder from the bottom. Once the solder starts to melt, I pull the heat, and as you can see here, you'll get really great results. So hopefully these tips help you out with your own copper pipe repair. Pipe installation makes shower valve assembly so much easier. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. This is a copper sweat adapter. It's a female fitting. First thing you need to do is deburr your copper pipe, use emery cloth on it, and then do the same thing for your fitting. I'm going to be using OD water soluble flux. This is H2O. I applied it to the pipe and the fitting, slid the fitting in place, removed all the excess flux, and added a flame protector pad. I apply heat to the copper first and then the fitting, apply my solder, and the prep work makes this so much easier. I then added wood blocking in the wall for the delta shower valve. That set the valve at the right depth in relation to my finished wall. I made sure the valve was set at 45 inches off the finished floor and centered on the drain. I screwed it in place, and I'm going to be using these copper crimp rings. I slide those onto the pipe and then crimp the pipe in the crimp ring in place and check it with a go-no-go gauge. I added the horizontal pipe to the valve, and I'm going to cut all these pipes and make them even with each other and use a T. The reason for the T is I wanted to show you how to use these double-A mini arresters by Sioux Chief. This is a water hammer arrestor, and it might be required by code in your location. But as you can see here, adding the PEX to this valve is awesome because the valve already has the PEX adapters, and also use a stud protector if necessary. I'm going to be using the riser pipe here along with a PEX barbed drop ear elbow. I put that on the valve, made sure it was plumb, and then I secured it to my wood blocking using 1-inch galvanized screws. But this is a really easy way to install PEX pipes for a Delta shower valve, and I hope the tips help you out. Tips will help you tile a shower wall. The first step was to set a piece of marble, make sure it was level, but sloped toward the inside of the shower. Then I applied thin set using directional troweling on the knee wall, compressed the first tile in place, and this is important. You want to have horseshoe shims between the tile and the tub deck for expansion and contraction, yet you want to make sure that the tile remains nice and level, and I use a laser level for that. Then I carefully cut a piece of metal profile, set that into the thin set mortar, then I added my second piece of tile and butted it up against the metal profile. There's a little spacer in it, so you can do that. Then I compressed the tile into the thin set and added my Tuscan seam clips to the top of the first row of tile that is set on the tub. And the reason why is those Tuscan seam clips are going to help me keep all my tiles nice and level. They're a leveling system. Once I was done with the first tile above the first row, I added my last piece, again making sure that it remained level. Then I tiled the face of the knee wall with the same tile and capped it with Rondex. Hopefully these tips help you tile a shower. To help you solder a Delta valve. First thing I did was dry fit a Schluter Curdy board and my tile to make sure I set the blocking to the right depth. As you can see here, it is at the right depth. I did the same thing for the drop ear elbow, and then I centered the valve on the drain, and then I deburred all the copper pipes and prepped them with emery cloth. I also used H2O water soluble flux for the fittings and the pipes. Here's a big tip: make sure you wipe off any excess flux. You'll get a great joint. And then I apply heat to the pipe first just for a little bit, and then I apply the solder from the bottom up, and then I flick little pieces of the solder off using an acid brush. And as you can see here, pretty good results. There's a hot tip. You can hold things in place with a measuring tape. You can also secure things using galvanized screws, and I also use a flame protector pad in the walls. So I start at the bottom and then make sure that my couplings look good. Then I also go to the bottom of the valve and I start my way up to the brass fittings. This will heat up the valve, and I always work clockwise around. I also apply heat to the T and then make my last solder joint where the water hammer arrestor is. And the reason why I do that is so that the water hammer arrestor doesn't get overheated during this process. But as you can see here, hopefully these tips help you get really good looking soldered joints, and I hope the tips in this tutorial help you out with your own project. If you are doing a bathroom remodel and you need help with that, make sure you check out bathroomrepairtutor.com because we have step-by-step tutorials that'll help you out with your project. PVC pipe cutting is much easier with the right tools. This is the pipe cutter from Reed. It's awesome. It can cut through a 2-inch pipe and gives you a square cut, which is important. Then this is the DEB4. This is great because it chamfers the pipe, so basically it makes it a tapered end, and that makes it much easier to fit into a drain. So hopefully these tips help you with your project. Kitchen wall installation begins by finding the joist location. I love this Franklin sensor, it's awesome. Then I connected the dots with my level and cut out that section of the drywall with an oscillating multi-tool. I also pre-drilled some holes into some blocking and secured that in between the joists. This is going to be ladder blocking, and it's going to catch our top plate of our wall. So I just positioned the wall underneath the ladder blocking, put it in place with a hammer, and made sure it was flush with the other wall. Then I put some shims underneath it, made sure that all the studs were nice and plumb, and they should be at least 16 inches on center, especially if you're going to tile that wall. Then I screwed through the bottom plate and through the shims, cut the shims, and then screwed into the ladder blocking and through the top plate, and finally added some blocking for fire code. And as you can see here, this is a super solid wall. And if you're doing a bathroom remodel and you need help with that, make sure you check out bathroomrepairtutor.com and watch our step-by-step tutorials. So visit bathroomrepairtutor.com.